Hello, my Tubby and Coos fans. It's me, Candace, here again for another Bookstore Romance Day event, our second one of the day. I am super excited about today and about talking about romance, especially with everything going on at the bookstore. As y'all know, we flooded on Wednesday night, so it has been really great to have like a day of just talking about romance, which is lovely and happy in these cases most of the time. So I'm happy to have this escape today. This panel I'm excited about because it's Bold Strokes Books. As y'all know, we love Bold Strokes Books at Chubby and Coos. We do the book fair at Saints and Sinners Festival every year, and Bold Strokes Books is always really big there. So we're really excited to have these authors with us today. And so the authors that we have are Mary P. Burns, who is a longtime resident of New York City. And when not writing, she is just writing still, because after breaking a 20-year-long writer's block, she doesn't really want to do anything else, which I can understand that. And she received a Master of Fine Arts in Playwriting from Columbia University in 1991. She lives with her partner of 16 years, a retired teacher, and that's Mary P. Burns. We also have Anne Shade, who had two goals as a little girl growing up in Chicago. And I want to talk to her about this because the first goal was to be the first woman to play football for the Chicago Bears. And her second goal was to write best-selling novels about life and love. And she did play football for the New York Sharks women's professional football team. And she's currently working hard on her second goal by writing the types of romance novels she believes represent her life, love, and community. And she knows that with your help, the readers, she will reach the bestseller list in no time. And we're definitely going to talk to her about her football dreams. And the third author we have with us is Allie Valley, who is the author of the long-running Kane Casey Devil series. I think The Devil Incarnate, it might be the next one coming up, and the Genesis Clan Forces series, as well as numerous standalone romances, including two Lambda Literary Award finalists, Calling the Dead and Love Match, and her 2017 release, Beauty and the Boss. And she also has a novella in the collection Girls with Guns. Originally from Cuba, Allie has retained much of her family's traditions and language and uses those frequently in her stories. And her father read her stories and poetry before bed every night as a child, which infused her with a love of reading, and she still carries that today. Allie currently lives outside New Orleans and has discovered that living in Louisiana provides plenty of material to draw from in writing novels and short stories. So welcome, Mary Ann and Allie. It is so great to see y'all. Thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
So what I want to start with, what I usually start with in all of my author events, is if y'all can each tell us like one or two fun facts about yourselves that aren't in your bios, that it would just be fun for people to know.
Let's see. I love fishing, and I do not like repetitive noises.
I hate repetitive noises too. It drives me nuts.
Yeah.
The worst is on airplanes, kids start like doing the same stuff over and over. It drives me bonkers.
Yeah. I love traveling, although I haven't done any lately. I also hate repetitive noises. Sometimes we get helicopters overhead here. I live right across from the UN. So, especially during, say, UN General Assembly Week, we get those helicopters. You just want to,
Yeah. What about you, Anne?
I don't have anything interesting. Let's see. Oh, I love planning weddings. That's my other passion. So there's writing and weddings. And that's
amazing.
I live to have a bed and breakfast where I can do both and just retire with a bed and breakfast, plan weddings, and write books.
That's amazing. And let's talk about your football dreams. Being the first woman to play on the Bears. Look, there's still time for that, right? I don't think any woman's ever played for the Bears. So there's still time, right?
I think I've reached the age limit.
I think that's awesome. But you did play football, right?
Yes, I played for the New York Sharks women's professional tackle team. It was my midlife crisis. I started playing at 42. and I played for 2 seasons before my body said, "You need to sit down." Uh,
That
so
is amazing. I love that
I
so
lived my
much.
dream.
And so tell the readers who are watching who may not know a little bit about each of your books, whichever one you want to promote. I assume the newest one. I know a couple of y'all have some that might be up for pre-order as well right now.
Yes.
Go
Well,
ahead.
One More Chance is coming out in October, so in a couple months. It'll be available on Bow Strokes as far October the 1st, and then everywhere else on October the 15th. It deals with some heavy subject matter. It's an abusive relationship where, well, they met in third grade actually, and then fell in love through high school. A very disapproving parent pulls one of them away with no explanation, and then they meet 16 years later. One is an orthopedic surgeon, the other one just had her leg broken by her abusive husband. And so there's a lot of resentment there because she did walk away without an explanation. So it deals with some heavy subject matter as far as domestic violence, but it is a romance. So there's some good parts to it. So it's kind of like a second chance romance.
I currently have Femme Tales, which is a trilogy of modern day fairy tales done with a little twist. I have an upcoming novel coming out in February called Masquerade, and it's a historical romance that takes place during the 1920s, during the Harlem Renaissance. So there's a love triangle, there's passion, there's sex, and there's gangsters. So
Nice. And what about you, Mary?
I've got my novel just came out. Let's see if I can get this in the screen properly. There we go. Forging a Desire Line. Came out in May. It's the first one. And it's after the dissolution of a 25-year relationship, Charlie Owens is getting back into the dating field because her friends are pushing her. But at the same time, she doesn't really want to. And at the same time, her ex is calling to tell her that she needs help because she's been diagnosed with cancer. So it's Charlie balancing all of this in her life and trying to figure out how to find someone new after all these years.
Nice. And just so that just to show folks, these are the ones that I thought y'all would talk about, so I'm glad I was right. So Forging a Desire Line, Femme Tales, and One More Chance. Those are the book covers. And of course, you can order them. That is why we're all here, is to hopefully have people buy books. Of course, I just love talking romance too, but buying books is always good. So what got y'all into romance? Like, what was the thing that made y'all want to write romance?
I actually didn't want to. I was DJing at the time at a country western club, and I had friends with all of the dancers. And one of them wrote gay romance novels, still does. And he knew that I was working on a novel, that I'd broken the writer's block. And he challenged me to write a romance. And I told him to get lost. And he kept after me. And then he took me to the romance, the Rainbow Book Fair one weekend. And I was just completely blown away. And so I started reading them. I said, all right, I'm going to take you up on this challenge. And I started reading them. And I thought, well, a lot of these aren't very good. This is like quite some time ago. This is, I'm going to say, back in like 2012. And I thought, geez, a lot of these aren't very good. And then I stumbled across Georgia Beers and Melissa Braden and a few others and noticed that these were all Bold Strokes authors. So I read a lot of the Lambda Literary Award winners and a lot of the Bold Strokes books. And I thought, well, yeah, I could do this. I mean, my friend had said with one hand tied behind your back, no, I couldn't. It's a more intricate genre than you think. It took me about 4 years to write the first book, but I was completely hooked after I started reading and studying them.
I started reading what they call the Bodice Busters back in 92, I think it was 94. And I noticed there weren't a lot of African-American ones. And I discovered one author that was doing it. And I loved historicals. So I actually finished all her novels in 1 week. and these were het romances. And then I started writing right after. So I started in het romances, in historical and contemporary. But the Lesfit came along with some self-discovery, as well as a friend saying, you need to write what you write for hets for us. So that's why I started writing.
Yeah. No, I started just a challenge to myself, I guess. And sometimes you want to write the books of the world as you want to see it, not necessarily as it is. So I started with actually the first one I wrote was Carly Sound, even though it wasn't the first one published. It was always nice when you turn something in and they were like, well, we really love it, but we have to change everything about it in the editing process. But it did turn out to be a much better book. But it was Carly Sound, actually, was the first one I ever wrote. And it's a romance, kind of a different kind of romance. But after that, I got hooked. And 30 books later, and I'm still at
it. So tell us, so with romance, there comes a lot of expectations, right? Like readers expect certain things to happen in a romance. So can we talk about what are the most important elements that you have to have in there in order to meet expectations, and at the same time, how do you spin that to make it your own so that not everybody, like romances are so different, even though there are, definite expectations. I view it the same way as like, we're nerds. So I love sci-fi, fantasy, stuff like that, which also comes with expectations, mystery, like a lot of genre fiction does. So what are some of the elements that you have to make sure are in your stories? And then what do you do to make sure that your stories are unique?
Well, I think the best element it has to be a happily ever after. If not, it's a tragedy. End up together. But I think one of the most important aspects is that while it has to be a romance, and whether you build fast, you burn fast or you build slow, it can't all be easy. You have to have some elements in there that either tear them apart or, it makes the hunt worthwhile, I guess, or make you work for it, so that it's not such, and then once they do get together and they decide on the happily ever after, then it has to end.
I think it has to have, I agree with Allie, it has to have that happily ever after. It has to have a little bit of angst or drama within it, because in reality, love isn't easy. So if you make it easy in the book, no one's going to read it, and it'll be a really short book. You also have to have that element of passion and love. It doesn't necessarily mean sex, but there's that passion the characters have to have for each other. And what makes each one different is depending on each story and each character. So it'll have the same elements as all the other novels, but it's not going to be the same story because everyone's story is different.
Yeah, it's funny, when I was reading them and studying them, I sort of took for granted that coming together and then something's got to go wrong. You've got to break them apart for a little bit before you bring them back happily ever after. That was a tough one the first time I was writing it, to figure out how that's going to work so that you don't alienate anybody, including your characters.
I mean, sometimes it's hard. I mean, even though the Devil book is really, you wouldn't think of it as a romance, but it really kind of is. I mean, there's a romance through it. And then sometimes you have to write a character that's unlikable. And in the first book, Emma was unlikable. She left not only her partner, but her child, which who the hell does that? And then she tries to come back. So in the second book, you have to redeem it. So it's like, it was a lot of paddling to get back to a place where the reader would like her as well as the main character would like her.
I think the best romances to me are the ones where they have to climb that ladder to get to their happily ever after, because then it shows how much it's worth it to them. Right. And they have to overcome all that drama. Whether it's the baggage from the past or current baggage, it makes it worthwhile. It makes it a good read.
Definitely.
Yeah.
In my case, I also found out I had pitted two women against each other for Charlie's affections. They didn't necessarily know that they were pitted against each other. And I broke off one of the relationships, which I was going to do from the beginning. And it's funny that now reading reader reviews, a lot of people kind of liked the one that I tossed aside. So I learned a little bit from that.
Well, let's talk about characters for a minute, because of course you all write very strong women characters in your books. So what are your tips for writers that might be out there for writing strong women characters, but also making them believable? Because one thing that I find a lot just in any fiction are characters like, it's like, this isn't, I don't know, this isn't believable. So what is y'all's advice, or how do you go about writing characters that are, strong women, but also believable?
I think what you need to do is, one, look at yourself. What are your strengths? Because a lot of people write themselves in their character. I can't say for sure, but I'm pretty sure that most people, if you ask them if a character, they have at least one character in all their writings that's either just like them or has a bit of them in them. But also look at strong women you admire, strong women you know, and take those traits that you like in them and put them within your character. Because if you're basing it on a real, if you want them to be realistic, then you base them on a real personality. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone you know, but just take traits from that person and build your character around that.
I also think,
yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Amir.
Okay. I also think you have to have vulnerabilities and second guessing, even if nobody else in the book sees it, even if it's just your character and your readers. I think that's kind of important, because that builds towards that strength too.
Yeah. And it's true. I think we write a little bit of ourselves in every character, whether we want to or not. But sometimes it just takes going back and rereading, because sometimes it is, you go out there. The only time you could kind of be unbelievable when you're writing a little bit of paranormal, maybe, and then you could let go of the reins of reality. But in the process, I think one of the good things, and I think that's what Bold Strokes does well, is the editing process. That once you write the character and you thought you did a great job, it's not necessarily that you didn't do a great job, but it could always be better. And I think in the editing process, that's where you find that.
Yeah, I think so too. I think editing is super important. I can say that the vast majority of time as a reader, the criticisms or complaints I have about books are all about editing. It's like this could have been fixed in editing. So I do think that editing is super important for sure. And Bold Strokes does have some really excellent editors there.
Yeah, they do.
So how do y'all think writing romance is different from writing other types of genres? So, some like mystery or sci-fi or fantasy. What do you think makes romance different?
I would have to say it's because people, while they have a lot of mystery readers, and you have paranormal and sci-fi and all this other stuff, the king of the hill is romance. And unless your heart is cold and frozen, you just love a good romance. So, and like I said, especially if you could see yourself in the characters that you're reading. And I think so that's why I think it's important to have different genres of romance, so that if you're a kid somewhere and you're confused, that you pick up a book and the characters inside, whether the sexuality or the color, like Ann said, the color of their skin or their ethnicity, that you see them yourself in that character, you don't quite feel so alone.
And I think the escapism of it is a big draw. It's if you're having a rough day or you're having a rough year like we all are, it's nice to be able to go into a book and escape. I started escaping into books when I was about 6. And by the time I was 8, I was reading Malcolm X's autobiography, because to be able to go into books and go into that world, whether it's a fiction or nonfiction, it's a chance to be able to escape for a little while. And romance gives you that moment of, that little sigh moment that everyone wants to have once in a while.
I think it's pacing too. I read mysteries. I don't read a lot of sci-fi or fantasy. That's just not something that appeals to me necessarily. But mysteries I do like, and I have a friend who's written a couple of them, and I noticed that she's part of the writers group that I belong to. Pacing that she had to go through to get this thing to work was kind of amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that there are definitely different expectations per genre, like what the genre is as well, from what people expect. One of my favorite things, I said this in the event that we did earlier today, one of my favorite things is when authors sort of play with reader expectations. And to a certain extent, I mean, we all turn to things like romance for comfort, I think, a lot of the time, where, you know how this is going to end, you know that, but it's the journey. So you have that sort of comfort of knowing, but the journey is different every single time. And so that's what can be exciting. I like it when authors sort of play with expectations in there. And it's like, we're hitting the beats, but not exactly how you think, but it still ends the same way. That's my favorite kind of book.
No, you beat them up. You just can't hurt the pet.
Right, exactly.
Kind of baby.
So kind of going along with that a little bit, how do you think romance can be used to challenge some of these like patriarchal societal beliefs about what traditional romance is? Because of course there are these beliefs out there of like, this is exactly what it has to look like, and it has to be between a man and a woman, it has to be all this stuff, or even traditional romance, gay romance, just traditionally. So how do you think that romance can challenge some of these expectations and beliefs? Or how do y'all use it? Because I think all of y'all do this in your books, whether intentionally or not.
Well, I think it's kind of like what Anne said. You do put a little bit of yourself in the books. I mean, your life doesn't go probably as swimmingly as some of these characters in the book. Then it ends up where, even though they go through some trials, I mean, life is trial from beginning to end. With hopefully the trials are not, they're dispersed so that you have some wonderful parts in the middle. But I think to me, it's just, like I said, when I started writing the Devil series, it was because I liked the genre. I liked that it could still be a great romance, even though Kane is, like I've said before, a little psychopathic. She runs a crime family in New Orleans, but I think she also has a very good romance and a good love life with the woman that she's chosen. So as long as it made, it was something that I wrote for me, I'm so glad that other people liked it. That it's where, like you said, the next one's coming out in January, I believe. It'll be book number 7, really 8 if you include the prequel. So people still ask for Kane, which I'm very grateful for. But I think it's that you need to put that out there, that it shows a little bit of yourself, but also can portray, because those are the best emails I get, is that, I'm a kid in the Midwest and I might be the only gay person in my school or whatever, and it's horrible. And I picked up a book and I read it and I see myself in these characters, and then it might be, high school doesn't last forever. I mean, it may seem like it when you're in high school, but it does not last forever, and that it does get better. Your life is what you make it to be. So the same goes with romance.
I think it's also a case of how should I put this? Negotiating with your editor to get certain things or keep certain things in there that you've put. For anybody that had, well, it doesn't matter. There's a necklace with little handcuffs on it in this book, worn by one of the characters, and the editor wasn't so sure where this was going and why. So we negotiated because I wanted that in there. And she said, I'm not sure our romance audience is there yet. And I said to her, ultimately, how are we going to move the needle if we don't put a little something in there to entice them and get them to see that maybe this is not, horrible, that maybe this could be a little fun. So she said, prove it, write it, and prove it. And I did. And so we left it in. So it's there. And I thought, romance audiences don't always know until they see something that, like, oh, yeah, maybe this could be fun. So that's how it worked for me to change things a bit.
Oh, sorry. I think I did it to kind of change the status quo. Like I said, I didn't see myself. And when I did, it was in maybe by the time I wrote Femme Tales, I read maybe 4 other African American romantic authors. And prior to that, a lot of the lesfic I read was violent, deadly, thuggish. I mean, it was all the stuff that I do not read. I could not see myself in any of those characters. I'm a Midwest suburban child. So I said, I want to see something out there that represents me. And an author that used to mentor me, Beverly Jenkins, told me once, write what you want to read. And that's what I decided to do. I wanted to write what I wanted to read. And I love fairy tales. I wanted to challenge how society saw these fairy tales, how they saw, African American love and lesbian love. And so I put together Femme Tales just to kind of say, it's a little different, and we can love too, and we can have our fairy tales too, and we can have our happily ever afters. So.
Yeah.
Awesome. And I'm interested in your processes and like writing rituals. So what do you do when you like sit down and write? Do you have like a ritual? Do you do it at a certain time of day? Like, what is your sort of process of writing as well? Anyone?
I'll start. I usually, my best writing is usually starting about 5 in.the.morning until about noon, or from noon until about 4. If I'm just starting something, it's usually 5 in.the.morning, because my characters come to me in dreams. I'm weird. I dream my characters. None of my stories have ever been just like, "Ooh, I'm going to write a story like that." They've come to me in dreams and kind of told me their story. So I have to get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning and put it on paper before I lose it. Once it's going, then I usually at about noon, because I'm working from home currently, I jump on the computer and spend a lunch hour writing and answer work emails for the rest of the day and write at the same time. So I'm got 2 computers sitting here and I'm double fisting. So that's basically my process.
No, I'm a fountain pen collector, so I actually write all my books before I write all my books.
Oh, wow.
Before I type them out. So I have plenty of notebooks lying around that have all 30 books in them, and I actually dictate into the computer afterwards, which is a good thing because you kind of add it as you go along. You might read it. I can't type and think well at the same time, so I like to write longhand first. And then, kind of like Anne, I do it early in the morning, and then in the evenings, I like to write. But I can write anywhere. I don't need, even though I don't like repetitive noises, I don't mind noise. So whether it's the television in the background, or sometimes I like sitting in the mall. You find interesting people in the mall that sometimes end up in the books. Like people watch. So I haven't had a lot of that yet lately because you're just stuck at home and you can't go anywhere. So it's been, and then lately before all this began and the rest of the world didn't want us, now that they don't want us anywhere, we used to travel a lot. So actually, after we took a trip to Morocco in December. So the new book, we're getting there. We're not quite there yet, but it'll take place in Morocco for the second half of the book.
I don't usually like composing on the computer, although I found out I sure could do it last December when I had, 25 days to rewrite the last half of the book during the edit process. I prefer I work in longhand as well. I use pencil and a pad, and there's a little park across the street from me. I call it my office. And I'm generally out there in late afternoon. I type up what I've written at night, and then look at it the next morning and edit and start the whole thing all over again. That's my preferred way to work. Although, like Anne, I wake up sometimes at 4:30 in the morning. I'm like, oh, there's an idea. I've got a little pad on the bed with me.
Cool. I think it's really cool that y'all write in longhand, and then have to type. Allie, I think your process is interesting because I think reading it out loud to dictate it probably also helps you catch things, right? That you wouldn't have caught before.
No, I learned a long time ago that sometimes, you read it and sometimes, you wrote it, for God's sake. You can misspell your name, and that happened one time. I looked at the cover and I thought, yeah, this looks good, because I've seen it a million times. And then later on, I looked at it and was like, that's not right. No, that is not the title of the book. Not sure what that is, but I know. So, you could misspell your name and you're not going to see it because you've seen it a million times. So now what I've discovered is that by reading it out loud, which I do, and sometimes I feel crazy, but I am kind of crazy when I'm at the house, and I'll just read it out loud whether I have an audience or not. And you catch, and sometimes when you just look at it, it makes sense. But when you read it out loud, it's like, was I drinking when I did this? This absolutely makes no sense.
I've started doing that too. I've started reading out loud. If I'll type because I used to write in longhand as well, but I started getting cramps because I work on a computer at work all the day, so I can't write as much. But I'll type away, and I'll print it up. I'm all excited. I'm like, okay, and I'll start reading out loud. I'm like, what word is that supposed to be?
Exactly, right?
I don't know what that is. Then I have to keep reading the sentence to figure out what was I trying to say.
Yeah.
That didn't make sense at all.
Don't you find especially like the give and take between the characters comes out better?
Yes.
When you read it out loud, because it's like a conversation and you're not like in a Jane Austen novel. I love Jane Austen, don't get me wrong.
So what is the biggest challenge for y'all in writing romance? And on the other side of that, what is the most fun for you about it?
Well, when I started writing romance, one of the reasons is that it was like, my partner was like, well, does anyone die in this book? There's a lot of people in my book. So every once in a while I write romance just because, and I have some fans who are like a little squeamish. So I'll put it out there, like, no one dies in this book. Not because somebody killed them. Like, somebody might die because they were sick or something, but nobody dies. But I think one of the biggest challenges is because I do love writing, like Calling the Dead and the Devil series, is that to kind of get away from that, and you have to write more like the everyday kind of people, which is what I try to put in my romances. But so that's the biggest challenge, is to not, first of all, not to kill anyone. And then, but they are fun. I do find that they're fun because you get to explore different, I do a little bit of research depending on what the person does. So like in the new novella collection, he's one of the main characters is a whiskey distiller. So sometimes it's fun in that you get to explore things that interest you. Whiskey interests me. I live in New Orleans, so spirits are a big part of our lives. So you get to explore things that you don't necessarily do for a living, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they shouldn't go in a book.
I find the story planning part can be the most difficult, especially if you think you've got the whole thing planned out and you're working on it and something comes careening your way that was not the original plan. And you're like, well, this is really going to work, but and the opposite of that is, yes, I love research too, like Allie, and of course writing the sex scenes is fun. In the next book I'm working on, what came careening at me was a wedding, and I thought, oh my god, I hate them, first of all. Right. And then I had to.
You need to call in. Let's go ahead and plan that for you.
I was just beginning to think, oh my god, I haven't been to one in years. What are they going to be like? And I thought, you know what, I'm just going to plan it and have fun. But I had to call in my little sister and say, you know, this is where I was thinking of holding this thing on Cape Cod. And she said, oh no, there's a much better resort. So I said, well, you're going to have to go take pictures because I can't go. So she did.
I think my favorite part is just getting the story on paper and seeing it come to life. It kind of like, I'll read some of my stuff, like Allie said, reading out loud is always good, but I'll read it and for a minute I'll sit there and think, who wrote this? Because it's not my voice. This isn't me. And the toughest part, I think, is when I have to do historicals, is the research. Because I don't want to sound like an encyclopedia, but I also want to at least, educate people on, because when I do historical, I do African American historical, like with the with what I wrote, one of my head ones I wrote, my very first one. I was so dedicated to doing research. I went to New Orleans, 5 months pregnant by myself.
Hopefully it wasn't in the summer.
Yeah. It was around September, October. But I was so dedicated in making sure that I got the scenery right, I got the feel of New Orleans right. I wanted to make sure that story, when someone read it, they could be there in Jackson Square and they can see what was happening. So the research is difficult because like I said, I don't want to sound like an encyclopedia, but I want to be able to pass on information that kind of weaves into the story or builds the characters.
Yeah,
I'd love to do a historical, but I'm too lazy to do that. So God help.
Did our internet go out? Hello?
Like you, because I do love historical novels. I really do.
Everything froze for me.
Oh, you're frozen, but we can hear you.
Okay, let me try and refresh this page and see what happens. Okay, I'm sorry, y'all. Everything froze for me, and I was like, did my internet go out? I'm so sorry.
Oh, we've lost her.
We've lost her.
Hopefully she'll be back.
What shall we talk about now?
I'm back. I'm so sorry. It kept kicking me out. I don't know what's happening with my internet. Yes. If I go away, y'all can keep talking. It's totally but I did want to know, Mary mentioned sex scenes earlier, and one of my questions is how to craft a good sex scene, because a lot of the times I'm reading these sex scenes and they're not good, especially
an active person in the room.
Right? Or like I don't know, most of the time it's dudes trying to write these sex scenes and they're just real bad. And the way men describe women a lot of the times, it's like, and they don't know anything about women's pleasure. Anyway, my question is, how do you craft a good sex scene that's like believable and not just he dipped into her honey pot?
That's my favorite.
That's my favorite. My favorite.
You just said it right there. It has to be believable. It has to be realistic. You can't, like you said, some of the positions and the way they have people, and it's so unrealistic. And it's this whole fantasy thing, the male fantasy thing, the hetero male fantasy thing, that kind of messes it up. You can't do that. That's not how it is for us. I mean, that's why we should write our own stuff.
Exactly.
You have to make it believable. You have to make it, and each love scene in each book or for each character is going to be different. You're not going to have this. I have 3 different stories in one book, and the love scene between each couple is different from each story because the characters are different. You might have someone who's timid, who's their first time, and they're not going to be as wild. They're not going to be swinging from the chandeliers. And then you may have someone who swings from the chandeliers and loves being crazy and wild with it. But it has to be, realism is the most important thing.
Yeah, I took note of and kept the books when I was doing the research of the ones that had the best sex scenes, because they can be challenging to write and they can be challenging to keep new and fresh with each story.
Yep.
Yeah. Actually, one of the best things that ever happened to sex scenes was Audible. And
Really?
no, I'm serious, because when I wrote the first couple of books, I thought the sex scenes were fine, and then I listened to the book on Audible, and it's like, this could be so much better. So again, going back to that reading it out loud, and especially when you have a really talented, and I think Goldsbrooks has really picked a talented pool of narrators on Audible, it brings the book to a different level when you have somebody who reads a sex scene and it's not just description, but you have dialogue in there and you have a lot of communication between the two partners. So I think, it's kind of funny to say, but I think Audible's helped up my game a little bit, I guess, because now it's a lot better. I mean, if I don't know if any of you have listened to Lori Prince with The Inheritance, but I think that she took that book to a different level just because of how well she read it. I mean, she was a really good narrator. So I think now when I write, not just the dialogue, but also the sex scenes, you keep that in mind, that eventually it'll be on Audible and you want it to be good. So again, it's that reading out loud.
Yeah, I agree with that too. I think read out loud for anything really, but it's so funny to me, and like a lot of times when I read a bad sex scene, like I want to read it out loud to people and be like, oh my god, listen to this, like what is going on here, and then you read it out loud and it gets like next level ridiculous, like it's even more ridiculous, and so like that's always like I think that's good, because I feel like it could show you really what's bad about it. Yeah, and so on a kind of a more fun note, tell us, what's the one thing off your bucket list that you want to do eventually, maybe if we can ever do things again?
Let's see. One, write a historical I can, and two, I would love to go. I've had it on my bucket list forever, is to go to Machu Picchu in Peru. So that might be where the next book takes place. You just never know.
Mine is to go on an African safari.
Oh, that's on my list too.
Write a book based on somebody there. Yeah.
And mine is either the Queen Mary or the Queen Victoria. I would love to. I had reservations to sail on the Queen Mary in 2016. I had to cancel them. But yeah, that's always been a dream.
Awesome. And how are y'all staying creative during these unprecedented, weird times? Or are you? Because like it's okay if you're not.
Surprisingly, I've been writing like crazy. I just finished 2 short stories for 2 separate anthologies. I'm working on 2 different novels, and because my job doesn't require a lot of brain work. I have a lot of free time. Don't tell my boss that. So I do a lot of writing. I jump between things, and and I'm reading stuff now, and so it's actually helped my creative process because I'm stuck at home and I'm too afraid to go outside. So
exactly. No, last week, somebody that we dearly love died of coronavirus. So it's kind of, for everybody who says this is just, it's just the flu. No, it's not.
No, yeah.
In a matter of 4 days, they were gone. But No,
Wow.
having to stay inside. The only time I go out is maybe to grocery shop because I don't want to starve to death. But and I do go into the office every once in a while. But I've been working from home a lot. But no, actually, I've written a lot more in the last 4 months than I have in a while. I'm with Anne. I think it's a good escape. I mean, if you have characters who are talking to you and they want to tell their story, it's a good just stop thinking about all this because I can't watch the news anymore. I'm just
Mm-mm. And Corona is in none of my stories.
yeah.
No.
No,
No, I think I'm just gonna gloss over that one.
Yep.
I don't.
it never happened.
Yeah.
A lot of the authors I talk to say the same thing, that like they're just not even, like, just pretending like it's not a thing. I lost the ability to watch the news a long time ago.
Yeah, I watched it this past week because I was really happy. I was rooting for Kamala Harris, and so that was a bright note in our existence. That maybe there is good times around the corner, but yeah, no, it's been kind of nuts.
What about you, Mary?
Well, I had about 3 weeks in April when the city was so totally shut down. I probably could have laid on the middle of 2nd Avenue and nobody would even know. And
I'm in Jersey, so I know what you mean.
it was really eerie and very odd, and I kind of didn't know what to do. I was like really at odds, and then I just went out to the park one day and said, "Get a hold of yourself. You've got to work. You've got to write." And it's just I've not looked back. It's the same routine I've had every day then, minus a lot of people.
Yeah.
I'm an introvert, so this hasn't affected me as much as it has a lot of people, including my husband, who is an extrovert, and he likes people and he likes to be around people and do things and go places. I am not. I've always been like, I'm happy to never do anything. So, so this hasn't been that bad for me personally, as far as having to like stay home and not do things. I've been okay with it. I get that a lot of people aren't, but I've just been like, I hate people. And like, if there's a silver lining in this, I am happy to forever have people stay 6 feet away from me at all times. And wear a mask around me. Like, if these are gonna be just norms, I'm kind of okay with it. Like, it's like making lemonade from lemons, right? If people have to stay 6 feet away from me forever, I'm not mad about that. So give us some of your book recommendations. Have y'all read anything? What do y'all have that maybe we could read and like?
Yeah, I just read Jenny Frame's new book. It was really, really good. It's paranormal, the kind of a vampire family. Longing for You, I think was the name of it. And then before that, I had read Emily Smith's new book. It's a medical romance, which is also one of my favorites. I know Radcliffe writes them very, very well, but Emily did a really good job on hers.
The last really terrific book I read was Anthony Doerr's All the Light We Cannot See. That was like, I ripped it several nights. And I just downloaded and read the first 3 chapters of Wingspan. I am not recalling the author's name, but it just grabbed me right away in just reading the blurb. So I bought it, downloaded it. Can't wait to really get into it now.
I haven't done a lot of reading lately. I have a ton of books. Since I joined Bold Stroke Books, I've discovered so many authors. And so there's a huge list right now. And I'm trying to figure out who I want to read next. So far, I've read Georgia, A Walk in Winter. Love that. But currently I'm reading, it's called Female Husbands. It's a book about trans through history. And it's for research for a character, and it's really interesting. So, and normally fiction books aren't interesting to me, even if it's research. But that's what I'm reading right now. So it's not, as interesting or as dramatic as a nice fiction, juicy fiction novel. But
yeah.
Awesome. And we like Jane Redman is a Bold Strokes author that is a local author here. I always try to plug Jane, and she has some really good mysteries that she writes. And Allie as a local author, and Greg Heron is another Bold Strokes books. He writes gay male romance and mystery. And so those are the other two sort of local Bold Strokes folks that I'm always plugging are Greg and Jane, who show up to everything I do most of the time. So
No, it's always good because when you tell them, go eat here, and they know what you're talking about. So
yeah, exactly. So I'm going to do one more plug. Let's see. Here are your book covers. So Mary's book is Forging a Desire Line. Anne's is Femme Tales, and Allie's is One More Chance. These are the newest ones, I think, are the ones that they talked about today. They also have books up for pre-order that are coming out either later this year or beginning of next year. So definitely check all of those out. You can please order them from us, hopefully. If you're watching this, you can do that we have a website, tommyandcoos.com/bookstore romance day. There you can see our schedule for the rest of the day. And we have a virtual book fair there where you can buy all the books we're talking about today. We're doing a giveaway. So go celebrate romance with us by visiting our website. You can also go to our bookshop site, bookshop.org/shop/Chubby and Coos, and the first thing you'll see there, the first thing you should see there, is our Bookstore Romance Day virtual book fair. So you can buy all of these books there as well. You can also, email us, call us, go online and place an order. There's about a bajillion ways to place an order. So please go ahead and do that any way that you can. And thank you, Mary and Allie and Anne, for doing this today. I always love talking to authors, and I'm excited to celebrate romance in particular today, where I found out we're the only store in New Orleans that's celebrating Bookstore Romance Day. So I'm really excited to celebrate romance and to hopefully get it. Romance has such a wide audience, but our audience is pretty nerdy and a lot of sci-fi fantasy readers who really like paranormal romance. So
we have some of those.
yeah, paranormal romance is pretty great. Sort of that urban fantasy vampire-y stuff. Glittery vampires are big. But thank y'all so much for being with us. Thank you everyone for watching, and hopefully buying books. And so everyone y'all have a good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye everyone.
Bye.